You can't see my hand, right?
Nope. Lisa Goodman, LCSW Temple member. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So where are we right now?
Where am I personally? So I'm lucky enough to be able to use my private office, which is about 15 minutes away from me. So I have a quiet place with a choice of 5 different offices to sit in.
It's wonderful to have that escape as well as that private space to be seeing people.
Absolutely. It's not quite the same as having coworkers and colleagues, but I'll take it.
Right. You're seeing people in a number of different capacities right now. And one of those that we were talking about earlier is you're seeing and working with a number of new moms. I imagine this is a particularly difficult time to welcome a young person into the world. What are you seeing? What are you talking with people about? How are you helping?
So the postpartum period is challenging for most new mothers. I mean, most new mothers have found that, it's a wonderful experience, but it's also physically and emotionally draining. You have these drastic hormonal changes and lack of sleep and feelings of isolation, and you have these changing roles, and sometimes you feel like you have this, sense of a loss of self. But since COVID-19, there are all these added concerns. First and foremost, exposure of the baby to the virus. So some of my patients have told me that their family members, haven't met their new baby yet. I have a patient with a medically fragile infant, and she not only hasn't introduced the baby to her family, but she's afraid to go outside with him. I recently spoke with a mom who's expecting her first child. And, while she would have loved to have had her husband in the room and her mother in the room and having her in-laws and other family members in the waiting room, only her husband is allowed to be there. She can't have any visitors. No one can be in the waiting room. So she's a little bit concerned also because some people are not being as strict as, as she has been, or she and her husband have been. So she's concerned about getting COVID-19, her husband getting COVID-19, and then perhaps being separated from the baby. Then kind of thinking about after the baby's born, what happens with visitation there. So luckily, her doctor has said, okay, wait a week or two before you have visitors. So many new parents want that opportunity to have that kind of time to get their footing and time to just be a family with just the 3 of them or just the 4 of them, depending on how many kids you have. But they don't know how to tell family members that. So now she has the perfect excuse, right? She can say, well, the doctor told me that it has to only be us. So there's a variety of things. Daycare is an issue. There are a lot of daycares that aren't open now. So either, some people can't return to work, or if they're, they have to work from home. So they have to manage taking care of the baby, taking care of other kids, taking care of the family while trying to work. Going back to kind of the whole childcare. For some women, they've had their parents were on board. Well, now, with the elderly being such an at-risk population, they may not have that. Right. So there's just a lot of different variables to that. So, what I usually have recommended to new moms is getting out, seeing people, not isolating, all of those things. So it makes it, it makes it definitely more difficult in light of all the stay-at-home orders. So I say is, I know that you can't do certain things, but video chat with your friends and family. Like talking on the phone is great, but it's not the same as what you get with video from the visual cues of eye contact and body language. That seems to help. taking a walk with or without the baby. I think it's important to, get out with the baby, but it's also important to get out by yourself, even if it's for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be a big, huge outing, but just that change of scenery, like sitting outside when the weather permits. And then I always say this to new moms: do one thing that has absolutely nothing to do with being a mother, being a wife, being a partner, being anything to anybody else except for yourself. So do one selfish thing a day. Whether that's like taking a shower or a bath or taking a nap or listening to music, even going into another room for a few minutes by yourself. I think all of those things are really, really important, and especially important, while we're kind of forced into this isolation.
Yeah, one of the things that you and I were trading emails about before this was that some of the welcoming ceremonies from a societal perspective, from a religious perspective, whether it's a baby naming or a baptism in different traditions, all of those milestone celebrations have been kind of pushed off here as well. And that also kind of adds to the challenge, right? If you've been looking forward to that celebration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you wait 9 months. Well, really, it's 10 months. 40 weeks is really 10 months, but they don't tell women that at the time, but it's really 10 months. You have all of this anxiety and this excitement and this buildup that you want to introduce this baby, and you want to share this happy time with people, and it's not the same. And it can be really disappointing to people. But it's also important to know that not everybody has those reactions. It's different for different people. This may be a blessing in disguise for some moms. So, with them not being able to return to work, or they're working from home, it also presents an opportunity for more bonding time and less restrictive scheduling. I told you about that one mom, where the doctor recommends the no contact with people outside of the home for 1 to 2 weeks. So that kind of again, there's that built-in excuse with none of the guilt.
Yeah. Absolutely. But you're seeing a lot of different people, not only new mothers. You're working with adults, you're working with teens. Are there generalities in what you're seeing that might be helpful to everyone as we're all trying to navigate the uncertainties of this time?
So I do see people in a variety of different settings. For my UPMC job, I'm seeing everybody via telemedicine. So I'm seeing everyone kind of how I'm seeing you right now. Again, it's nice to have the visual cues, but it's awkward. And that's usually the first thing that I say to people when I get on the line is, I know this feels different, but we're gonna do this together. I'm still seeing some of my private clients, I'm still seeing in person. What most of the adults that I've seen are anxious about getting infected, anxious about infecting their children or other family members. A lot of people are noticing financial strain of either being out of work themselves or being cut down to one income. Food insecurity is definitely an issue for people who are in less affluent areas. So luckily, food banks are open, and they, to my knowledge, from what I've been reading, they're up to full capacity and accessible. Another consideration is, women in abusive relationships. So that, their options are more limited. Shelters are still open. But their opportunity to have a moment by themselves to make that phone call if they're in trouble, to get away from their abuser, is that much more difficult. So I actually called the Women's Center and Shelter before we did this to find out they are still operating at normal capacity. They have no restrictions, and they can be reached 24/7. I have the hotline number as well.
Sure. Would you share that number and I'll
Sure,
put it
it's
in the comment
41,
box?
sure, it's 412-687-8005.
Great. Thank you.
Women can also download an app called Are You Safe? That's capital R, U, and then the word safe. It's an app that they can access resources, safety planning. The Women's Center and Shelter also told me that they're going to be launching a text chat soon. They don't have a date yet, but hopefully that'll be happening relatively soon. So that's good.
Yeah.
So those are the adults. Now the teenagers and the younger adults that I see, less concern about infection and much more feelings of loss about the disruptions to their everyday life. Being homebound is especially difficult for teens who thrive on interaction with peers. You know, as we were saying before, before we started talking on live, the teens that are, you know, in school, or the kids that are in school, had all these, they had visual and auditory cues. They had bells between classes. They were traveling to school to get from class to class. Now, you know, they're in their rooms, or they're in one room, and one class kind of bleeds into another class with no delineation. At least with, you know, with my school district and some of the other, you know, people that I've talked to in other school districts, they have very little interaction, face-to-face interaction with their teachers. And their classes are not being done in real time. So again, that's also a disruption to their normalcy. So my daughter kind of rolled her eyes at this, but what I have said to the teens I see is, you know, set alarms. Set an alarm. So if it's a 45-minute class, set an alarm for 45 minutes. Okay, at that 45 minutes, you're done with English for that period of time. Get up, walk around, get something to eat, use the bathroom, maybe, you know, go and do your math class in the living room, or your history class in the dining room. You know, do something to where you're not staying in one place, and you at least have some kind of normalcy in like getting up and walking around and changing your environment. So those are some of the teens. Now, what about the teens that are graduating from high school, graduating from college? They have a whole new layer of things, which is, you know, maybe they're not having a graduation ceremony, or their date has been moved, or it's been switched to a virtual setting. Kids that were counting on summer internships or jobs or orientations, they're all in a state of limbo. So there's a lot of things to consider, you know, kind of in light of this pandemic, and a lot of ways that people are affected, emotionally, physically.
Yeah, that's right. You know, if we can walk that professional, personal boundary for a moment, as you're talking about graduating high school seniors, you get to take some of your own advice here, as you have a graduating high school senior as well. I'm curious what you would say to parents who are in a similar situation, who are trying to help their young person and navigate this kind of strange, bizarre entry into the world of adulting, who are missing some of those milestones that they had been building up to for quite some time. What could parents be doing?
Well, acknowledge the loss for yourself and for your kids. So, I mean, whether it's high school or it's college, they've worked really hard to achieve this milestone. In general, it's not really helpful to tell kids that it's not a big deal, or that it doesn't matter, or to get over it. While it might be said in an effort to like minimize the negativity, it actually tends to be more invalidating of their feelings. So let them talk about it, express their anger and disappointment. I mean, we as parents want so badly to lessen those negative feelings for our kids, but they're perfectly normal in this situation. So take pictures, post accolades, welcome cards and well wishes. Let them know that you're proud of them and that this in no way diminishes their accomplishments. Maybe plan a Zoom graduation celebration where friends and family can all talk about your students' accomplishments over the years and the growth that they've noticed. Encourage your student to be their own valedictorian and talk about their high school or college experience, what they've learned and what their future goals are. When I think about my own daughter graduating from high school, I can't help but remembering how I felt shortly after she was born. So Shoshana was born just 3.5 weeks prior to 9/11. And I remember I had just finished nursing her and I looked up at the TV and saw the Twin Towers coming down in a blaze of fire. And I remember, looking at her and thinking to myself, what world did I bring you into? And how can I protect you from this? And I think we're kind of all in that situation of what are we doing now? And how can we protect our kids? And I think, again, you're doing the very best that you can do. We are all works in progress. Just much like, with parenting, there's no instruction manual. There's no instruction manual for how we're supposed to feel with this pandemic and how we're supposed to deal with this. I mean, there are certainly some things that are suggested that might make it easier, but there's no rhyme or reason to any of this because there's still so much uncertainty.
Right. There's so much uncertainty, and this is hard. And particularly when we're separated from those normal sources of support, it can feel even harder. And I've spoken to a number of people who it's not changing their behavior, but the frustration is growing, the weariness is growing, the need to break out. And again, they recognize that this is an emotional impulse that would not be in their best interest. And so they're able to stifle it for now. But the news is filled with people who are allowing emotions to cloud their judgment.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can we be doing when the weariness starts to get us further and further down?
So again, I think that the social isolation is really difficult for most people. And for people who are already experiencing like depression and anxiety or other mental health issues, the isolation can really be crushing. So I know it's not the same thing, but reach out to friends and family by phone or video. Don't let this be a reason why you cut off more. Get out of the house, take a walk, do yard work, go for a walk, barbecue, do an art project, like do something. We've also found that keeping some sort of schedule, having goals to reach every day. So set an alarm. Take a shower, get dressed. I know you don't have to, okay? I know people aren't seeing you necessarily, but it really changes the way that you feel. I mean, even me personally, on the days that I, don't get dressed as if I'm going to work, I feel totally different. One of the reasons why I go to the private office, even if I could find, privacy at home, it's just, again, I'm mentally in the work mode. That kind of helps me just kind of normalize this. It's much easier to kind of be talking with people when I'm in work mode, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
So control the things that you can control. There are a bunch of things that we can't control, and that makes most of us very, very anxious. We like to know that we have control over our own destiny. And in this situation, there is a lot of unknown. So do the things that you know are useful. Okay. So follow the CDC guidelines, wash your hands, wear the personal protective equipment, social isolate, do all of those things. But for the other stuff, you're doing the best that you can. You're doing the best that you can. And while we would all like to become like virtuosos with, as musicians or cook these amazing meals. We're seeing it all over social media. It's okay if we're not doing that. It's okay if we don't feel motivated. So, cut yourself some slack with all of that. And if you find yourself comparing yourself to people on social media, get off of social media. Sometimes too much information isn't good. So, limit that. I've had patients without me even telling them who have said, yeah, I'm no longer on Facebook, or I've taken it off my phone, or I'm taking a break from this, because it's just this overstimulation of constant information from all kinds of sources. And who do who do you believe? So find a source, whether it's the CDC, whether it's the World Health Organization, and decide that at a certain time every day you're done. Like, you're done with social media, you're done with the TV, as far as it has to do with the pandemic. Give yourself that break. I think that's really, really important for people to hear. And all that pressure that people are feeling to, do a million things because, they should all be spring cleaning because we're all home. It's okay if you don't feel that way. It's okay if you have days where you do nothing. It doesn't make you a bad or unproductive person. Use this time to, figure stuff out about yourself. We have a lot of time, with our immediate family members. We have a lot of time with ourselves. So this is a good time to kind of get back in touch with ourselves. What do we like? What makes us feel good? What are the things that we need? That whole idea of mindfulness that seems to be the latest buzzword. The whole idea of that is to, appreciate the little things, appreciate not multitasking and doing 20 things at once. For example, I'm talking to you on this, Zoom call or Facebook Live, and that's all I'm doing. I'm not on my phone. I'm not writing anything. I'm not looking at anything else. And that's kind of part of that mindfulness of being in the moment and paying attention to what you're doing at any given time, and not feeling the need to, while you're washing the dishes, also be on the phone and watching the news. It's okay to just be doing the dishes. And I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of regain that sense of self. And it may sound trite, but there is something to be said for taking the time to smell the roses. There is something to be said for going outside and, listening to the birds and, noticing the smells around you and noticing how the ground feels under your feet. That all helps to ground us. And I think in this time where we feel so ungrounded, doing anything to help us feel more connected with each other, with the world, with ourselves, I think is all really, really important.
Absolutely. I worked with a colleague in Cincinnati, Ohio, who taught me a really important lesson about the rabbinate, but it applies now as well. He said his favorite thing every day was doing the dishes. So much of what we as human beings, we do because we know it's the right thing to do, even if we can't measure the results of what we're doing, or we're playing such a long game, we may never actually see that what we're doing has benefit. But
Absolutely.
the dishes, you can take control of that. You can see the problem, you can fix the problem.
100%.
Time limited, you feel good when it's done. And I think those things matter now.
I just saw a client who was grieving the loss of his wife after, 45 years of marriage. And, he's struggling because, again, it's harder when you're in isolation. And it's harder to, he has survivor's guilt and, all the things that go along with mourning the loss of a loved one. But he's also isolated, isolated in his home. He now lives in this big home by himself. So we were talking about, making a to-do list, making like, figure out one task, one thing that you want to have accomplished so that you can visually cross it off your list. Like doing the dishes, it's just one example. We like to feel productive. We like to feel like we are making a difference. So I've talked a lot about, what we do for ourselves and connecting with other people. But for some people, some people find connection in helping other people. So, volunteering their time, offering to go to the grocery store for someone or cut somebody's lawn who can't get outside. Sending a package, sending a letter to, friends and family. I don't know why this experience, all of my family lives out of town. I don't know why it took this experience to figure out how nice it is to make a birthday video for someone who lives far away. We've never done that before. Why? I mean, I haven't. And it's such a nice idea. It's such a nice, I don't know, it's just a nice little added thing that we never thought of before. So I'm hoping that this experience will also show us that there are things that we could be doing, even when we're not in isolation. There are a lot of things that we could be doing to connect with people. And hopefully we'll find a better way to do that.
I love it. So I want to make sure that you get the last word here. What else do you want people to know? What else should we be thinking about as we continue this marathon?
I think, again, repeating what I was saying, which is practicing self-care and not isolating yourself, having as much control over the things that we can control, and learning how to kind of practice that radical acceptance of the things that we can't. So you can control, again, when you wake up in the morning, you can set an alarm. You can control the tasks that you decide to do during the day. You can control how you connect with somebody, albeit not in person, but control the things you can control. And live each day to the fullest. Take one day at a time and know that, while this is unprecedented, we're all in it together. And we are all experiencing, in one way or another, we are all experiencing this together.
Lisa Goodman, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for joining me this early evening. I hope that you stay safe and that you stay mentally well as you continue to guide me and so many others through this difficult path. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.